What we're going to be covering in this session is the foundations or the fundamentals of NLP. Based on the universal law of cause and effect, we're going to actually be talking about how cause and effect, how that equation affects us. So basically, the way it works is that for every action we take, there is a reaction, or for every effect, there is a cause, and we are that cause. Now, generally, most of the population work on the premise that whatever is happening to them isn't their fault. And based on this universal law of cause and effect, I'm going to show you how we actually create our own reality, or what's happening to us in our life at the moment is based on the actions and then the reactions that we have in regard to that. So during this short segment, we're going to be talking about empowerment. So basically, if we can be at cause and understand that we are the makers of everything that's happening in our life, that empowers, because it gives us the ability to then change what is happening. While we're actually pointing the finger and blaming somebody else, we don't have that power to be able to make those changes. Because as long as we're sort of pushing it outside of ourselves and believing that we have nothing to do with what's happening in our lives now, that then disempowers us. It disempowers us. It doesn't give us the power to be able to make the changes necessary to live the life that we want or live the life that we love. So even though technically, obviously for the mathematicians out there, this isn't so much as an equation, but for the purposes of what we're doing here, I'm going to be calling it the cause and effect equation. So basically, when you're on the effect side, it's when you've always got reasons as to why something hasn't gone the way that you wanted. So those reasons are generally, based on the weather, or because it's someone else's fault, or about, for example, when we worked with a lot of businesses during the global financial crisis, everyone was blaming the GFC for the reason why their business didn't survive it. And yet there were many, many businesses that did. So what is the difference in that regard? At the moment, because I'm a farmer as well, and we have a property on York Peninsula, and we know that a lot of parts of Australia are going through drought at the moment. And working with some of those farmers, it's an understanding of, even though they can't make changes to weather, they can't control Mother Nature as such, what they can do is actually control how they react to it, how they feel about it, and things that they can do to make it work in their favour to the best of their ability. By being able to do that, you're at cause, you're actually empowered to take action. You're not at the effect or the mercy of something else that's happening around you. So basically, when you are at effect, that's when you'll hear yourself with all the reasons, the excuses why things aren't going the way that you want them. So it can be ranging from anything in your life that isn't going the way that you want it, from simple conversations with people, or, for example, with teachers when you're dealing with children and they're not doing what you want and you're blaming them for it, you are at effect. Because if you were at cause, you'd be looking at ways of being able to approach that situation differently to be able to get the results that you want. So being on the cause side of the equation, that's what gives you the results. So you can see that this cause and effect equation, it is results versus reasons. When you're at cause, you get the results that you want because you are empowered. In effect, you can change the course of whatever is happening so that you can get the outcome that you want. When you're at effect, you've always got the reasons or the excuses why it hasn't worked, or you can hear yourself blaming someone else for it, like doing the finger pointing. And I know it's very cliched, but it is so true. When you're pointing the finger at someone else, you've got three pointing back at you. And, it's looking at those three and seeing what it is that we can change or what you can change in regard to what's happening around you. So during the course of this little webinar, we're going to be talking about how to move you from effect to cause, and hopefully, with your permission, we'll be able to do that for you so that you can get the results, which in turn gives you the empowerment to be able to make changes in your life or in your vocation or your occupation at the moment or your career to be able to get the results that you want. So when we talk about cause and effect, we are going to generalise. So anything in your life, whatever area of life you're looking at, if you're at cause, you are always empowered. You're able to make the changes necessary for the results that you want. So one of the main questions that we always ask our learners are, which side are you on? And it's about being honest with yourself. If you're sitting there going, well, everything would be all right. Of course I'd be at cause if this, that, and the other. Well, that in itself shows that you are at effect, because you're giving reasons as to why things aren't how you want them. So once you actually honestly answer the question, which side are you on, that gives you then the ability to be able to make the changes that you need to affect and create the life that you want, or, you know, the desired situation in your working life, for example, or your personal life, to be able to have what you want. So if we go a little bit further, the way that we are created, I guess, is that everything that we learn, first, of course, is learned consciously, and then it's relegated to what we call the unconscious mind. So it becomes like an automatic behaviour. So a lot of the times we do things without even having to think about them. So if you think about the first time you learned how to drive a car, and for those of you that learned how to drive a manual car, you'll know how difficult this was. You know, you get in there and you've got to hold your hands at 10 and 2. You've got the indicator on one side, the wipers on the other. Then you've got 3 pedals. You've got the clutch, the brake and the accelerator. You've got to look in the mirrors. You've got to change gears. And it's really overwhelming when you first start driving a car, and you've got to be very conscious about what you're doing. And of course, that's when you're doing all the bunny hops and all that sort of thing before you get started. But now that you've been driving for a long time, you basically open the door, you get in the car, and you don't even think about how to drive. So as soon as we've learned something, that's the beauty of how we are actually programmed, or how we program ourselves, is that once you've actually learned something, it's relegated to the unconscious mind, so it becomes an automatic behaviour. Now, that's a great thing, because of course we can't be paying attention to everything that we do. So if you look at some of the other automatic behaviours we have, like our heart beating, breathing, walking, we don't have to think about moving our left foot, then our right foot, then our left foot, then our right foot, and breathe and have our heart pump. That's all relegated to our unconscious mind. So it's basically, that is the mind that's responsible for making all that happen. So, so that's a wonderful thing. We need to have that. The problem arises when we've actually got automatic behaviours that aren't serving us well. So those behaviours that we do, that we've learned to do, but now realise that they're actually not benefiting us at all. But because they're so automatic, they're out of our conscious awareness. And for you that have done mindfulness training, this is where all the mindfulness come in from. And but I'm hoping that by the end of this series that we're doing with regarding, you know, developing successful minds with teaching excellence, you'll have a much better idea on how to make those changes fairly instantaneously, rather than having to take a long time to happen. Because that's the beauty, once we train ourselves, and the way that we teach NLP, we use NLP to teach NLP, which means that the change in behaviours can be instantaneous. So that's the beauty of what we do here. It doesn't have to take a very long time. What it does take is for you to become mindful, or pay attention to some of those automatic behaviours that you have. So at the same time, while I'm going through this with you, I am talking to you directly about it, but I'm hoping that once you grasp this concept, of course, then you'll be able to actually share that with all your learners as well, and for other people in your life also. So when we look at these automatic behaviours, basically they are reactions. It's the way that we react to something that's happening around us. So a lot of the time, for example, a situation arises and our automatic behaviour is then that reaction that we get. So say, for example, someone gives you a snide remark, or, you know, says something quite gruffly or rudely to you. Our automatic behaviour, because what we do is we reference what's happening in the past. So how we've reacted before, or what that snide remark might have meant to us back, you know, who knows how long ago. So someone might have given you a snide remark, and it may have hurt your feelings, or made you feel sad, or made you angry, whatever it may be. So whenever a situation happens now, we automatically reference the past as to how we reacted, because that's the only way we know how to react in the now, automatically. So once we receive a snide remark, our automatic behaviour may be immediately to get angry about that. Our reaction might be to get angry. So you can see how when someone gives you a snide remark, it's more about them than what it is about you. So it's about not taking things personally, but it's also understanding that nobody can make you feel anything that you don't want to feel. Now, a lot of the time we do this when we're doing our live trainings, we always ask you to turn to the person next to you and and find their angry button or whatever emotional button it is. Because if somebody can make you angry, that means that you must have a button on the outside of you for them to be able to push to make you angry. That's a really big realization, because once we do that little exercise, which may seem silly as we're talking about it right now, but you think about it, once we do that exercise and the person that's external to you cannot find a button that they can press to make you angry, it's a big realization that that button pressing is an internal job. We are the ones that choose which button we press in that regard. So we always have that choice. And once we understand that, we then also realize that that choice is ours and that we're able to change it. So I'll just go through a couple of other things as well before we get to the crux of that. So say, for example, you might wake up in the morning or through the day and you might just experience a sad feeling, and automatically you give meaning to what that sad feeling could mean, which then affects automatically your reaction to it. So it may be that you want to remove yourself from any situation, or, the tears come and they start flowing, whatever it may be for you, but your reaction is automatic in that regard. Because we're not paying attention to what's happening. We think that we get this sad feeling, we have to react in this way because we're referencing how we used to do it. And I'm here to say that that's not necessarily so. So we are in control. So if we're at cause, that means that we're able to control what we do. So when we're talking about mindfulness, it's about mindful behaviour, taking responsibility for what we do. You see, if we take 100% responsibility for what's happening in our lives, it then gives us the response ability, the ability to respond in a different way. So for example, we have a situation that happens. If we can press the pause button, and Viktor Frankl, who was a prisoner of war survivor, said that between the stimulus and response, or between a situation and your response, there is a gap. And in that gap lay our freedom, which means that when something happens, we have this moment in time that we can take to pause before we actually react or respond to that situation. So rather than reacting, it gives us the opportunity to be able to respond to the situation rather than react. So for example, we have the situation. If we're paying mindful attention to it, you give it meaning. So whatever happens in your life, nothing has meaning until you give it meaning. So we have this situation where you receive a snide remark. If you can take that pause and remind yourself that nothing has meaning until you give it meaning. Like nothing has meaning until you give it meaning. So even if you receive a snide remark, what does it really mean? It can mean anything you want it to. And I prefer to look at things that, receiving that snide remark, that's about that person, what's going on in their life for them to be able to do that. It has nothing really to do with me, for example. Now, I'll clarify that a little bit more. I'm a firm believer that if you hear the same comment from different people, or even the same person, more than 3 times or 3 or more times, then it is time for you to have a look. So say, for example, you receive a snide remark about something in particular and you hear that over and over again, then absolutely have a look at yourself first, because it may be something that you need to change so that you're not receiving that snide remark. But generalising it, once you receive a snide remark, it actually has nothing to do with you. So nothing has meaning until you give it meaning. So if you can pause and take a moment to reflect on that, pay mindful attention to what your automatic behaviour could be, then you have a choice. You can choose to react differently. So once you pause, your response rather than reaction, it may be to have a conversation with that person, to let them know that you don't appreciate the remark that they've said, or you don't appreciate the tone in their voice, or whatever it may be. But your response may be to have that conversation with that person. So imagine how different that would be. You receive that snide remark, rather than reacting and getting angry and blowing up at them, you actually take that pause and respond by actually having that conversation with them, or letting them know that that snide remark is inappropriate or unacceptable, whatever it may be. The key here is about being consistent. And you can see that if you take responsibility for what's happening around you, you can see how you can automatically and immediately make changes to your reactivity to that. So basically, In a nutshell, cause and effect. When you're at cause, you influence and take responsibility for everything that happens in your life, and that is what leads to success. When you're at effect, you feel that your life is random, that life's just happening to you, that you have no control over it, that you have no control about what others do. That's when you're blaming him or her, or you can see it's their fault, it's not you. As soon as you see that finger pointing outside of yourself, you know that you're effect. So you need to turn around and have it point at you and ask yourself, what can I do different in this situation? Because ultimately the response is totally up to you. You can make the changes in your life. You are in control of what happens in your life. You just have to pay mindful attention to what you're doing. And once you actually pay attention to what you're doing, then you're able to make the changes and notice the automatic behaviours that are not benefiting you. So it's about bringing them into conscious awareness, changing them. And then once you change them and they make you feel good, then they'll become automatic again. But just remember, nobody can make you feel anything. It's always your choice. You're the one that is pushing those buttons. You're the only one that can make the change. And just because you used to react that way, once you pay mindful attention to it and take 100% responsibility for your actions, then it gives you the power to be able to change that. And that in itself is extremely empowering.